everybody. Welcome to today's York Festival of Ideas session. I'm really excited to be here today. Just want to welcome everybody, those of you who are joining us here live today, and also all of those of you who are watching the recorded version. I've just got a few technical issues to tell you about before we start. So first of all, if you're watching live, you can ask questions using the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of your screen. This is available throughout the event, so just ask questions when you want to. If you have any technical issues, such as loss of Wi-Fi, you can rejoin our event using the original link. Please remember that today's event is being recorded, so you can watch again. If you would like to, you can view subtitles in the event, and to turn these on and off, you should see a little CC Live transcript button at the bottom of your screen. So now I'm really delighted to introduce today's speaker to you. Gale is a mum and an ex-vet who once dragged her family along with a year of buying nothing new. She blogged about it and found her voice and her thing. So she's author of the Sustainable-ish Living Guide and the Sustainable-ish Guide to Green Parenting. She now blogs, writes, podcasts and speaks and lives about all things sustainable-ish. She believes we are not all helpless and that our actions are not insignificant. It all starts with that first step and continues one step at a time. So Jen, please do go ahead when you're ready.
Hello, thank you so much, Sarah. What a lovely intro. Thank you all for coming today. Really excited to be here. What I'm going to do, and it's probably going to irritate the hell out of Sarah, because I would really love to know how old people's kids are. Because it's quite interesting, then I might be able to skew some of the ideas that I give. So I'm just an invitation, if anybody wants to, just to pop into the Q&A, which isn't really what it's used for, but just to pop into the Q&A how old your children are. And that might just help me with the sort of most useful information for you guys. As I said, apologies in advance to Sarah, because it probably means that then she's got to scroll through loads of that before she gets to the questions and things. So brilliant. 9 and 7, 6, 17. Cool. 2. Brilliant. Keep those coming, because that's really useful. 3 and 5, 1 and 3, 7 and 5, 10. So we're looking like we've got one teenager at the moment, but quite a lot of sort of under 10s, which is great. Brilliant. Fabulous. Thank you for that, guys. So I'm going to share my screen, and this is always the slightly perilous moment where everything could go horribly wrong. I'm assuming that's all right, unless I get a big shout from the tech crew that's that's not working. So welcome, hello to this little talk about sustainable-ish parenting, and I'm going to explain to you what the ish means, and I think we probably all got a pretty good handle on what parenting means. So my story, I know Sarah's already given me a brief intro. I always kick off by saying I am an ordinary knackered mum of 2, because I think sometimes we feel like if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to make a change, maybe we've got to be a Greta or a David Attenborough or somebody who's running some amazing, CEO of some amazing organization. But honestly, I promise you that as kind of ordinary knackered parents, we absolutely can make a difference. And my journey started when we spent, as Sarah said, a year buying nothing new. That feels like, and anything pre-pandemic feels like a long time ago now, doesn't it? But it was 8 or 9 years ago, really naive decision, just sort of, that might be quite fun. And I hadn't at all joined the dots between what we were buying, what we were throwing away, the impact of what we were buying, all those kinds of things. I was vaguely aware of this sort of climate crisis, or it wasn't even called the climate crisis then, climate change and things, but didn't really feel like there was anything I could do about it, that, it couldn't really be that big a deal because the government weren't making a big deal of it, all those kinds of things that I think lots of us can probably relate to now as well. And that I think I was somehow, not deliberately, not maliciously, not consciously, but sort of looking away from it, thinking that's not my, I've got all these other things to deal with over here. That can't possibly be my thing to deal with as well, can it? And then this year really taught me that actually, yes, that is my thing to deal with as well. But that there is a huge amount of power that we have as individuals, as parents, as families, to really make a difference. And now we fast forward 8-9 years, and this idea of sort of sustainable-ish came about. And there's an online community, about 60,000 people across different platforms. And there's this idea about taking imperfect eco-action. Last year, I founded the Knackered Mums Eco Club, which is a sort of membership for, doesn't have to be just mums. We've got grandparents, we've got stepmums, we've got people expecting, we've got people without kids. We don't have a dad yet, I don't think. So if anyone wants to come and join us, you are more than welcome to. And as Sarah said, fortunate enough to have written 2 books. So the Sustainable-ish Living Guide, which came out January last year, and the Sustainable-ish Guide to Green Parenting, which we're talking about today, which came out in March this year, which is really exciting. So I'm just going to spend like 2 minutes talking about the problem. Now, if you've elected to come and watch this talk, you're probably already pretty engaged, pretty invested, but just so that we kind of know, I guess, what we're fighting for, if that makes sense. So we are already seeing the consequences of 1 degree of global warming. And when people talk about 1 degree, doesn't sound like a biggie, does it? I've got a cup of tea here. I couldn't tell you if it was 90 degrees or 91 degrees. And what we're comparing the temperatures to is the average global temperatures pre-industrial revolution, because that's when we started pumping lots of carbon into the atmosphere. So 1 degree of carbon, and I think maybe that's why we don't engage with this very much, because it doesn't sound like a big deal. And we're talking about the difference between 1 degree and 1.5 degree, and 1.5 degree and 2 degrees C. Doesn't sound like a big deal for us, but it is a big deal for the planet and therefore for us. So already we're at 1 degrees, and we're seeing, rising sea levels, shrinking Arctic sea ice. We've had, there's a great book that I've just been sent to look at, and I can't remember the title of it, which I'm really feel mortified about, but it's about the loss of seasons that we're sort of seeing here in the UK, and more extreme flooding and all those kinds of things. And I'm sure we can all relate to that. We had a really weird spring, haven't we? What we need to do, what the Paris Agreement has said, and what, we've got the important COP26 coming up in November. We need to limit warming to 1.5 degrees C, and that is entirely possible, but to do it we need unprecedented changes. Now, when I first read that, this was a report that came out by the IPCC, though, so I think that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Unprecedented changes, I thought, wow, that sounds pretty hardcore, doesn't it? Like, I don't really know what that means. If I can do it, it sounds hard. Unprecedented, I have to confess, I had to look it up in the dictionary, means something you haven't done before. We have got unprecedented nailed down. Even before the pandemic, as parents, we've got unprecedented nailed down. That day where you bring home a precious new thing that you've got to keep alive, you are there constantly then doing unprecedented things that you haven't done before. And certainly in the last 16, 18 months, we have all, there have been unprecedented changes. It's not been particularly enjoyable or pleasant, but we know we can do this, and we know we can get through this. So David Attenborough talks something like about this idea that the decisions we're making today are absolutely critical in ensuring a safe and sustainable world for everyone, both now and in the future. And I think in one of his documentaries, he says something like, the decisions we're making today will impact people in 100, 200 years' time. So, no pressure. Let me just check, because something came through on the chat and I just want to, brilliant, fab. So it's saying, don't worry about asking people questions. It'll all be fine. Great. So one of the difficulties, I guess, when we talk about the idea of sustainable-ish parenting or sustainable parenting or green parenting is that actually we're told that having a child is one of the very worst things we can do for the planet. So, we've maybe had this, oh gosh, I always feel like it's a bit of a double-edged sword having children, to put it lightly, that at the very same time, you're suddenly much more aware of the future, of the fragility of the future, of the importance of planetary health. You're kind of, you have no sleep, no energy, no headspace, and all this stuff coming into your house that you never even knew you might need. So it's a really difficult time. And then you've also got messages like this telling you that of all the personal choices we can take to reduce our contribution to climate change, having one fewer child is the biggest one we can make. And I can never get my head around that, because I don't know how it works. I don't know which one of mine I'd choose to send back. I don't know if it means if you wanted 3, you just have 2. If you wanted 2, you just have 1. I don't really understand how that one works. But obviously, there is a debate that goes on about, whether there are people on birth strike, all these kinds of things. But we're talking about parenting. We're making the assumption that you've made the decision at the very least to have children. Now, I had a look. I don't know if anybody's read Mike Berners-Lee's great book. He must get so cross with that. Mike Berners-Lee's great book, How Bad Are Bananas? And in there, he talks about the climate impact of having a child. And this is the phrase, and I've just got to read it to make sure I get it right. Unless you light a bushfire, the decision to reproduce is probably the biggest carbon choice you will ever make. Now, I'm assuming none of us are going to go out lighting bushfires. And he's crunched the numbers, and he reckons that having a child has a carbon impact of anywhere between 210 tons of carbon dioxide or over 5,000. But interestingly, what he talks about a lot is this idea that it's not necessarily the number of children that we have, although obviously that has an impact. It's more about how we bring those children up. So I think we can all really easily see that the impact of a family in a developing nation having, say, 4 children is still not going to be as great as the impact of a Premier League footballer having a child, or I can't even think of a current celebrity, as somebody living a very celebrity, very carbon rich lifestyle. So what is really important here is that what I'm going a very long-winded way about saying is please don't feel guilty about the choices you have made about whether or not to have children. The children are here. We absolutely love them to bits, and they are our motivation for making these changes. And we can make a significant difference, either 200 tons of carbon or 5,000 plus tons of carbon, depending on how we choose to bring our children up, the values that we instill in them, and the way that they continue to lead their life once they're adults. So this is in no way intended to bring any guilt onto anybody. So I said I would explain this idea of sustainable-ish. And I think most people kind of get it when they, as soon as they hear that the ish on the end, it's giving you that wriggle room, that permission to be imperfect. Because I think sometimes we're held back by thinking, there's no point me getting started because I can't give up my car because we live quite rurally. And actually, there's no way my husband would give up, would go vegetarian or vegan. And, oh, God, the kids just constantly need new shoes or so actually there's, this is really difficult. I can't even start. So that stops a lot of us from starting, this idea that there's this green hierarchy, which is what that picture at the top is, that we're starting off at the bottom with very pale green and we're working our way up to be uber crunchy, greenest of green. And actually, it's much more like this bottom picture with the messy splodge, different shades of green in different areas of our lives, on different days of the week, whether it's lockdown, whether it's not lockdown, depending on how annoying the kids are being, all those kinds of things. And that is absolutely okay. So the very last thing I feel like we should be doing as a sort of sustainable community is trying to I think there's a lot of bashing, a lot of big green bashy sticks I talk about. And, and this idea that people sort of tiptoe in and go, oh, I've just decided to do this, and then get jumped on saying, oh, no, you shouldn't have done that. You should be doing this. Actually, we're moving in the right direction. No change is too small. We're aiming for progress and not perfection. And I talk a lot about focusing on the things that we can change and not the things that we can't. So one of the things that I hear a lot about, one of the frustrations I hear a lot from people is, the supermarket shop. So we go and we do our supermarket shop, or we get our online shop and we unpack it, and we're left with these bags and bags of plastic packaging. And it's really frustrating, and it's really visible, and we see it every week, and it feels like it's a very difficult thing to change. And do you know what? That's because it is. That's because it's a big system change that's needed. So actually, there are things that we can do to help that. But instead of that being our place where we get stuck and we stopped and we're just like, well, I can't change that, so it's all useless and I can't do anything. Actually, let's take a step back. Let's look at plastic in the bathroom, or let's look at our energy provider or something else, and just see how, rather than get stuck on one thing that feels really hard to change, let's have a look, because there's lots of low-hanging fruit, which is absolutely great. The other thing that I think is really, really, really important to recognize is the absolute power of us. It is incredibly easy to feel you're just one person, just one family. What possible difference could you make when you're working really hard to reduce your waste, and then you see Doris down the road put out her bin and it's overflowing and there's stuff coming out of it, and they haven't even put their recycling in the recycling bin, and what's the point of me trying? But actually we are so much more powerful than we realize. So I sort of talk about this a lot, but I hadn't been able to articulate it quite so clearly as it was articulated to me the other day. So I asked if I could shamelessly steal their layers that they were talking about. And this idea that lots of us might not particularly like being labelled as consumers, but we live in a very consumer society. We buy stuff. We are all consumers, but therein lies a huge amount of power. So I'm going to talk about consumption in a little bit in relation to little people, but there's this amazing quote by somebody called Anna Lappe, and it says, every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the kind of world that you want. And I love that one. It is so powerful. So it means that when I'm having my argument with my husband about buying organic milk, this is and he's like, well, I don't know if it's any better for us. And I'm like, I don't know if it's, I think it is better for us, but it's definitely better for the planet. And every time I'm buying it, I'm casting a vote for an organic system, a kinder system to the planet. And, businesses at the end of the day will follow the money. So if we stop buying the cheap, massively made, mass-produced things, they will make less of them. If we've seen this in the vegan movement that's absolutely exploded, the number of vegan products that are available now in the supermarket, because there's a market for it, because people have started buying it and shown that there's this market there. So we are hugely powerful as consumers, hugely powerful who we choose to give our money to and who we choose not to give our money to as well. That's really, really important. And if we choose not to give our money to an organisation because we don't agree with what they're doing, this is where our second sort of sphere of influence, if you like, comes in as citizens. So we can then get in touch with them. I mean, this is one thing that social media is amazing for, and say, just thought I'd let you know, like, I was a really loyal customer of yours, absolutely love your products, but I'm really disappointed by the fact that you're doing X, Y, and Z. So I've actually decided that I'm not going to buy what you're doing anymore, and I would really love to hear your plans for change for the future. So you can use your voice. That Chris Packham did a talk last year, I think, and he talked about, the power of our choices and the power of our voices. So using our voices as consumers, but also as citizens. So, we all get to vote. It's difficult sometimes with our electoral system to feel like our vote counts, but it absolutely does. But also we have elected representatives, so we can make our voices heard with them. There was a study in 2017, I think, that asked MPs why they weren't taking more action on the climate crisis, and the brain ache Saturday morning, and the overwhelming response that they got was that it was because they weren't hearing from their constituents that it was an issue. Now, I'm sure that's changed because we've had Greta and we've had school strikes and we've had all sorts of things. But actually, this is a great moment now to tell your MP that you really want them to build back better. You really want a green recovery. Asking them what their voting record is on various things. If there's important bills coming up, asking them how they're going to be voted. Getting in touch with your local council. Power is being sort of devolved down, or maybe not power, but the financial incentives are being pushed down and down from central government to councils to local governments and things. So actually town councils, parish councils are holding some of the cards now, and certainly county councils are. So getting in touch with your elected representatives there can be really, really useful as well. Our third sphere, if you like, is as influencers. And I think a lot of us would, I'm not really an influencer. I don't swan around on Instagram looking beautiful. And I don't, I don't really understand what a hashtag is. But actually, our behavior, the things that we do, influences others. We all know that as parents, how our behavior influences our children. We hear them parroting back the things that we've said to them, often wishing we hadn't. We have a huge amount of power as influence, and just by being seen to make changes, you're giving other people permission to make these changes. You're reminding other people of these changes. I think if we can share these things on social media, it helps to break down some of these sort of green stereotypes that there might be, that, you can only do this if you're what did Boris say, a tree hugger or a bunny hugger or a mung bean eater or something. And actually, if your mates, if the mums in the playground see you doing that, oh, actually, she's doing that, and she looks like the rest of us. Maybe we could do that as well. This is really, really important stuff. So never underestimate the power of just being seen to do what you're doing, and be open to having those conversations. And then the fourth one always makes me feel like we ought to have some kind of capes or start wearing our pants outside our trousers. But this idea that we are change agents. So in all the organisations that we're involved in, in our workplaces, we can be the change agents within those workplaces. We can be the ones just asking the questions, saying, does anybody know where our pension is invested as an organisation, and whether that might be in sustainable funds? Oh gosh, we seem to be getting through an awful lot of plastic cups. Like, is there anything we can do about that? Just asking these questions. And again, the same with our kids' schools, and the same with any clubs or anything they're involved in, and things. If we can just be, 10% braver sometimes, and just ask these questions in a really gentle, non-judgmental, non-preachy way, we can absolutely, I talk a lot about ripples. You make your change and these ripples spread, often without you even knowing. So we really do. I hope you're feeling empowered and inspired that you do have a huge amount of power to create change. Now, consumption goes through the roof, doesn't it, when we have kids? We're suddenly, we're told we need from a pregnancy test, or pre-pregnancy vitamins or whatever it is, all the way through. It's a bit like when you get married, you suddenly realize there's this whole market for weddings, and everything has a price tag that's 4 times as much as it would normally be because it's got wedding in front of it. And it feels a little bit like it's the same with babies and kids. So, you need a Moses basket, and you need a Yummy Mummy changing bag, and you need this and you need that. And actually, one of the biggest things we can do is to cut our consumption. And I know that that's not particularly appealing or inspiring or aspirational, but it's something we really need to do. About 60% of global greenhouse gas emissions are a result of household consumption, which was completely shocking to me when I sort of read that. But actually, that's hugely inspiring as well, because this is stuff that we're buying. This is stuff we can do something about. So this picture here is one of my absolute favourites. And I always say, if I was brave enough to get a tattoo, this would be it. But I'm not brave enough. It's by an amazing Canadian called Sarah Lazarovich. And it's the hierarchy of needs. And we're looking at it. The aim is that we start at the bottom and we work our way up to the top. So it's dull, it's boring, but can we use what we've already got? Do we really need a special changing bag, or can we use the backpack that we've got in the cupboard? Do we need special maternity leggings, or can we use the elasticated leggings we've already got, at least for quite a while? Using what we have is the most sustainable thing we can do. The most sustainable version of anything is the one that you've already got. And sometimes it's a pain, because it will be like rummaging around in the drawer of doom in the kitchen to find the batteries that you think are probably in there to put in the baby monitor, whereas actually probably the easiest thing would be to nip out to Tesco's and just get a new pair. But it's like I said, it's not very aspirational, but it really is the most sustainable thing that we can do. Thinking about how you can repurpose the stuff you've already got to use for your kids, just because it's not specifically made with a baby or a child sort of title in front of it. There's no reason why we can't use it. So we got is it melamine, the stuff you use for camping, and things like that are great for the kids. Actually, melamine's rubbish, isn't it? Because when you drop it on the floor, it breaks. We've got some of those they look like tin, like camping mugs and bowls and stuff like that, the old white ones with the blue rims. We've got some of them. They're indestructible. They're amazing. They're not necessarily kiddie ones, but they're great for the kids' food and stuff like that hopefully they're not going to drop all over the floor. So things like that, thinking about that is really, really useful. Borrowing is having such I want to say a moment. Obviously, borrowing, swapping and thrifting are all a bit more difficult at the moment as because of the pandemic and concerns around sort of virus transmissions and things. But hopefully, as things continue to ease, we will see these things start to open up again. But one of my absolute favourite things to always recommend to people is for toys for kids is something called Whirly, which is WHIRLI. I think it's whirly.com. It's a toy subscription site, and you pay a monthly or an annual subscription, and you get a certain amount of tokens, and you can order the toys that make up that a number of tokens. They come to you, the kids play with them, they get bored, you send them back, they can pick some new ones. And it's just a brilliant way, not only of saving money, because they reckon, I can't remember what the average spend is, something like £350 a child on toys a year. And I was like, no, we don't spend that. But when you think about Christmas and birthdays and all those, going on holiday and all those things, then possibly we do. So, this is a great way of saving money, but also keeping those toys, those toys are then bringing joy to X number of extra children. It's introducing this idea to kids that we don't necessarily need to own these things. We can borrow them, we can pass them on, we can love them for the time that we've got them and then hand them on to somebody else. So I just love it. I think it's a brilliant idea. It's a great suggestion for grandparents and things when they're looking for things to buy for the kids for birthdays and Christmas. And we're all familiar with that idea of Christmas coming up and looking around and thinking, oh crap, like where am I going to fit anything else? And this really helps with that, helps keep that clutter down and things like that. And they've got everything on there from baby gyms through to balance bikes, through to garden toys. Great for this time of year. They've got like water pistols and paddling pools and all kinds of things. So that's absolutely one of my favorite ones for borrowing. There's also loads of opportunities now for sort of renting your child's wardrobe, because, especially when they're teeny, kids grow so quickly, don't they? And when they're really tiny, you get all these gorgeous things gifted to you that they often just never wear. And it all just ends up then sat there with you feeling guilty about it. And you, God, what do I do with this? I don't want to just shove it all at the charity shop, but I can't be bothered to go and do a car boot or list it all on eBay. This kind of solves that problem for you as well, and means that outfits get to, I think it's an average of 9 children they get to sort of be worn by. So there's great... there's a couple of great ones. There's one called the Little Loop. I said a couple and I can't remember any of the others, but they're all in the book. There's one called the Little Loop, which is absolutely great. And the idea is that you can sort of get a capsule. I'd love a capsule wardrobe. I'm not stylish enough. A capsule wardrobe of kind of basics. And it's often some of those more maybe expensive organic brands that you might think, oh, I don't really want to splash out on that when they might be out of it in 6 months' time. And so it'll be lovely, like Frugi and stuff like that. So that's a really great way to do it. And lots of and if you've got kids, if you've got friends, pick your friends carefully. Pick friends who've got kids about a year older than yours so they can hand stuff down to you. That's always a really great tip. Swapping is great. I mean, I remember when my kids were little and were at toddler group, we had a toy swap day. So we all had to sort of squirrel in the toys that the kids were no longer using so that we could... because obviously if they see them, then it's their favorite toy ever and you couldn't possibly get rid of that. And then sort of, have them all on a table where the kids couldn't see them and we could just go and take what we wanted. And just a way of really nicely, especially in the run up to Christmas or something like that, just getting some new to them toys that without keeping all these other toys in circulation and things. Having spent a year buying nothing new, it will come as no surprise to you that thrifting or buying secondhand is one of my absolute favourite things to do. And, with a little bit of patience, with a little bit of forward planning, you can get the vast majority of things that you need for your kids secondhand. I'm finding as mine get bigger, mine are 12 and 10 now, that finding clothes is sometimes a bit more difficult secondhand. But definitely, for the under 10s, I think your charity shops are just your absolute friend. Just be careful that the sort of a few things that you shouldn't buy secondhand. So mattresses, cot mattresses for babies, they don't recommend because of a potential link to sudden infant death syndrome. Car seats, if you're not 100% sure that they haven't been in an accident, just because a lot of the damage can be internal with cracks and things, so you're not entirely sure. And the same with bike helmets for the same reason. So just be sensible, but obviously, you can save yourself a huge amount of money. I always feel a bit guilty having making in there with sort of time poor, sleep poor parents, but as the kids get bigger, you might find you have a little bit of extra time making things with them, making things for them for Christmas and things like that. You're not going to throw away. We had friends who made their kids a bunk bed from scratch, which I think was just showing off. But guaranteed next time they move, they're not ditching that, are they? So, making is great. It's a great way of reconnecting with our stuff, of realizing how much resources and work goes into making something, and just helps. The whole point of this whole hierarchy or bierarchy is that we're slowing down our consumption. And that's the whole point of it. And then buying new at the very top there. And that is in no way to say you must never buy anything new ever again. It's about this idea, buying less, buying better. I know, over lockdown, lots of us probably fell into a bit of an Amazon habit. And that's, I intentionally sort of don't use Amazon. So it's perfectly doable. But if you are someone who's sort of finding that they're relying on it a lot, could you just say, actually, I'm not going to put a load of pressure on myself that I'm never going to use Amazon again, because there's always going to be those things you've forgotten, the birthday or whatever that you need. But can I try and make it so that instead of being my first port of call, Amazon is my last resort? Can I look for local independent shops? Can I look for organic or fair trade versions? Just who do I want to give my money to? Who do I want to be supporting? I think that's a really important thing to think about. Plastic and waste is huge, isn't it, with the kiddos? We have this tsunami, almost, it feels like, of plastic and stuff and toys and nappies and wipes coming in. So I never thought I'd be a hierarchy geek, but clearly I am, because I've got 2 in 2 slides, and the waste hierarchy is another of my favourites. What are the things that we can refuse to buy? Can we just, I am that parent who says no to balloons for their children. We've got these lovely paper pom-pom reusable ones that we bought for the first time this year that we can just take down, fold up, and then they can come out for every celebration. We can't have a talk on parenting without talking about nappies and wipes. Where are my little stats here? 3 billion nappies a year we get through in the UK, 3 billion disposable nappies, and nappies account for about 2 to 3% of household waste. Households using cloth nappies decrease their waste by up to a half. So again, remember that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So when we had our first, we were rabbits in the headlights, didn't have a clue what we were doing. It felt way too much to go straight into reusable nappies. But once we found our feet and we got in touch with the local council, and the nappy man came round and showed us how to do things, it felt much more doable. But even then, I soon discovered that going on holiday with a child in disposable nappies feels much more like a holiday than going on holiday with a child in reusable nappies. And we still use disposables at night. And that's okay. It's about finding what works for you and for your kids without making a rod for your own back that you're going to end up hating. So, if you are looking at reusable nappies and it feels a big step, have a look, see if you've got a nappy library near you. They're amazing. They can you can either go to them or they can come to you. They can talk you through it, or they can talk you through washing. They can lend you some for you to try and work out what works for you. So I would always recommend looking around. Same with slings. There's sling libraries that often locally that because there's a bewildering variety of slings, aren't there? And you get to try some different ones and work out what works for you and your baby. Wipes, I think, are a really lovely, easy transition into sort of reusables. Where's my stat about wipes? We use 10.8 billion a year, which works out at 38,000 each per lifetime. Wow. And, back in the 70s, I'm told, wipes weren't even a thing. And now we have them for everything, don't we? So reusable wipes are amazing. even if you just want to use them for hands and faces and things at first, even if you just want to use them at home at first whilst you're working out how this works and if you can make it fit in with you and all that sort of thing. So again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. Let's think about how we can make this work for us. And there's no right or wrong. There's no, you must do it this way. We've all got to compromise, especially when the kids are involved, aren't we? Because we might have our best intentions and they're like, eh. I'm going to have to speed up now so that we've got time for Q&A. So if you have got questions and things, pop them in there, because this is going to be a bit of a rattle through. Food, I've put a picture of a lunchbox there because this is like the lunchbox of dreams, isn't it? My kids would explode if they had a lunchbox like this. It'd be so exciting. But food, when we're talking about food with kids, food waste is a huge issue, isn't it? So food waste goes through the roof when you start weaning and things like that. And food waste, if it were a country, would be the third biggest emitter of greenhouse gases after the USA and China. So food waste is huge. 50% of food waste occurs in the home. So something we can really, really work on. So, some people suggest letting the kids help themselves so that they are not taking too much. You can, really make use of your freezer. If there's stuff that you've made pasta and pesto, which the kids have eaten 79 times before, and then they've turned their nose up at, can you stick that in the freezer? Can you serve it? Can you eat it for lunch the next day? Getting a little bit creative with leftovers and things can really, really help. So loving your freezer is great. Meal planning is really great, and it doesn't have to be a really rigid, on Tuesday we will have spaghetti bolognese. More like at some point we will have spaghetti bolognese this week, and I will squeeze that into the schedule whenever that works. When it comes to reducing meat, things like giving the kids stuff that they're familiar with, but maybe using half the amount of meat. So good old spaghetti bolognese, can you do it with half amount of mince? And I usually just grate in extra carrot and courgette because it grates and the kids then don't notice it. Or chuck in some lentils, or, if you're doing a casserole, use half the amount of meat and chuck in a tin of beans as well. Things that, are nice, familiar foods for them, but you're sneakily reducing the amount of meat in there. That can be really helpful. And then, thinking about when we're about plastic and waste, thinking about reusable options of things. So there's a great, you can see there that reusable pouch you can put smoothies in there, you can put yogurt in there, all kinds of things. So those kinds of things are really, really helpful as well. But I just think that's the plastic free lunchbox of dreams, isn't it? Transport. Transport is a really weak area for us. We live relatively rurally. I have to, we live about 3.5 miles from school. And I made the mistake of starting off, it should have start as you mean to go on. And we should have kind of worked out some way of cycling to school with the kids. So like these electric cargo bikes are becoming more and more common. And I really wish we'd kind of invested in one of these when the kids were little, and sort of got them used to this idea that we don't have to take the car everywhere, because now they're really, really reticent to sort of to taking the car. But checking my stats again, 38% of journeys in the UK are less than 2 miles. And that's a distance that, when the kids are in the buggy, it's really easy, isn't it? Because you just shove them in the buggy, shove a snack in their faces, and off you go, and you can pile everything into the buggy. It becomes more difficult once they're wanting to do it themselves. But scooters are great. We had a great thing called a trailgater, which we could connect the bikes onto. But this is my very ish solution for the moment. Our youngest is still at primary school. I cannot face the arguments, the tears, the whinging every morning trying to get him to cycle to school. So we have a bike carrier that goes on the back of the car. I drive him to school. I take the bike off, cycle home, cycle back again, pick him up, drive home. And now the weather's nice. I'm trying to persuade him that at least once a week we might be able to cycle. The advantage with this is, look, I couldn't resist putting a little picture in. This is our dog's carrier to go on the bike, and she comes and she runs most of the way home with me. So she gets a walk in at the same time. So that's my compromise. It's not perfect, but it means that on the days I can do that, it means that we're reducing our footprint by 50%, our school run footprint. But, have a look at the bus, have a look at, it's frowned upon at the moment, isn't it? But lift sharing, all those kinds of things. Just think, how can we just shave 10% off here? How can we shave 20% off here? All those kinds of things. And very lastly, it's not a specifically kid thing, but I think it's an area that we maybe don't think about hugely. And obviously our pensions or any investments maybe that we're making for our kids, grandparents will sometimes want to start them off with little savings accounts, don't they? And oftentimes our pensions and our savings and indeed our current accounts can be used to being funded all kinds of things that we would never in a million years want to give our money to. So things like tobacco, fossil fuels, deforestation, modern slavery, arms. So actually, by the power of our money at the checkout is huge, but also the power of our money when it's in any kind of financial institutions. So this picture is from an amazing campaign called Make My Money Matter, and their big push is to get pension companies to divest from fossil fuels. So if you head over to the website, which is linked to there, you can have a look. You can pick how well your pension is performing or otherwise, and it will give you suggestions of what you can then do and how you can influence your pension provider and all those kinds of things. And you can do the same with any savings accounts that you've got, or any of the kids' accounts, or even your current account. There's a great website called switchit.money. You can go on there, you can see how well your bank is performing, and it will give you suggestions if you decide you want to move. So I just sort of thrown that in there because I think it's something that we maybe don't think about a huge amount. Now, this is all very well, isn't it? All being like highly motivated and we're going to make these changes, and I've been to this talk and we're going to do these things. But making change, our brains are hardwired to resist change. Making changes for ourselves is difficult enough. When we've got to get everyone else on board, it becomes even more difficult. So I just thought it might be helpful to have some tips at the end here for getting the kids on board. Meet them where they are. My kids, much to my frustration, aren't massively engaged with the climate crisis. I don't feel like it's appropriate for me to load them up with my eco-anxiety, to make this a big issue for them, because they're going to have to come to it in their own time. And especially with little ones, we need to be really careful how we talk to them about it so that we're not scaring the pants off them, and that we're talking about it to them in a very positive, action-orientated way. And if they don't seem that engaged, then we just step away and we let them come to it in their own time, because there's a danger, I think, that we're sort of robbing our children of their childhood and their enjoyment of the normal things that we want our children to be enjoying. Nurture a love of nature. We protect what we love, don't we? So as irritating as it is when you're out on a walk for the toddler who stops and looks at every worm and bug, and really nurture that. There's a brilliant app called Seek that's a free one from World Wildlife Fund, and you put it on your phone, and then you can take a picture of all the bugs, all the plants, all the animals that you see, and it will tell you what they are, which is a lovely thing to do. It transformed our lockdown walks when the kids were getting a bit bored. Okay, so what's that? Do you know what that is? And look, I found this. Really great. And talk to them about the changing seasons, about the different, about the wildflowers and how important they are for the bees, all those kinds of things, because like I said, we only protect what we love. Keep things really local and relatable. It's really difficult for us as adults to grasp this idea that us leaving the telly on standby means the polar bear's got a bit less ice to stand on, let alone for our kids. So, keep things really local, really relatable. Talk about the local park, talk about the seasons near you, talk about if it's litter you can see locally or anything like that. Try and bring things back so that it's very much on their level and their local community, and even locally in your house. Really focus on action, because it's the same for adults as well. It's very overwhelming, all this information, and you can get sort of paralyzed with anxiety. So focus on the really tangible things, the really visible things that you can do. That's why I've got that picture there. That's my son. We've just been and done a litter pick. Litter picking is one of my favorite things to do with kids. Think about things that they can do. When we had a pretty harrowing conversation with my then 10-year-old after watching a documentary, and, floods of tears. It's like, okay, so what can you do as a 10-year-old? And we brainstormed this list of at least 10 things he had power over and he could influence. Have a think about forming a family eco committee. in the Eco Schools project, the first thing that they do is form a school eco committee, and it's very pupil led, and it's looking at, what are you already doing well, what can you do next? If your kids are really engaged, have a think about whether you can do that with them. Right, kids, this month we're going to look at plastic. What can we do around plastic? All those kinds of things. I'm super aware I was supposed to finish at 22, so we had time for questions. So this is going to be a real rattle through to make sure we've got time. And then just some ideas to get the kids on board. Litter picks are absolutely phenomenal. Do some nature scavenger hunts. Have a look at the Eco Schools programme. It's absolutely brilliant. See if you can get your local school involved. Do a plastic audit. Think of, save up all the plastic that you're using over a week, and then sit down with the kids and discuss it and see what's in there and how much there is of that and what you might be able to do about it, giving them that ownership again. Doing bug houses and stuff in the garden is great. And at this time of year, planting veggies, planting insect-friendly plants, talking about the insects, getting them out in the garden. And I've just put a picture there of the Happy News. This is a subscription that we get, and it's brilliant because certainly as your kids get older, if they're, hearing news on the telly, on the radio, seeing snippets in the papers and things, it's really depressing, isn't it? A lot of us try and avoid the news. The Happy News is brilliant. It comes out every 3 months. It's a summary of all the amazing things that have happened. And it's really kind of uplifting and gives you that different slant on what things are going on and keeps that optimism there. Getting our partners on board can be quite difficult sometimes. Talk to them. They're not mind readers. They don't know what's going on in our heads. Talk to them about our anxieties, about our worries, about why we want to make the changes that we want to make. Find out what their objections are. Often it will be financial, or often they'll be worried that you already seem a bit stressed and overwhelmed, and this is going to contribute to it. And then you can sort of talk about that. Be prepared to compromise. Nobody likes the C word, do they? But sometimes we do just have to compromise to fit in and slowly step our way to where we want to be. Choose your battles as well. Don't go in hardcore with we're going to be vegan. Okay, can we do meat-free Monday? Or just pick something that you draw your lines. What are the things that are really, really important to you? And those are the ones that you have discussions about. And the other ones, maybe you can let go a little bit. And this whole idea, we talked about as being influencers, show, don't tell. So make these changes, let them see that it's been relatively easy and it's saved money and all those kinds of things. And that can be easier. Getting the wider family on board can be even more difficult, especially at Christmas and birthdays and things like that. So go for the low-hanging fruit at Christmas. Think about the relative that you think is going to be most likely to be on the same page as you or nearly on the same page as you. So for us, it's like, I think my sister-in-law would be pretty open to a discussion about fewer toys or that kind of thing. And go for that person that you think is going to be the easiest to have those conversations with. Share what you're doing and the changes that you're making throughout the year, because if you're sort of new to this, and last Christmas you were fine with them buying loads of tap for the kids and you didn't even really think about it, and this year you're like, no one must buy the children plastic. That's a big change for them, and they haven't necessarily been part of that conversation and that journey. So trying to share these things that you're doing, and that's another thing that social media can be great for. Explain why you're making these changes. Sometimes you might need to frame it slightly differently. Sometimes you might need to say, the house is absolutely rammed. We cannot fit any more toys in. The children really struggle with having to let go of toys. Can we think about some other options to give them at Christmas? Those kinds of things that still mean you're getting the end result that you wanted. Be really specific when it comes to gifting. Don't say Lego. Say the model that they want. Don't say books. Say the specific book that they want. And then you're less likely to end up with some sort of unwanted tat. And again, this idea of showing, don't tell. Some quick suggestions for books for kids. All of these are brilliant. I absolutely adore the Wild Tribe Heroes series, which is those ones with Marley's Tangled Tale. Fabulous resources for kids and for schools and things as well to start this conversation with the children. But, books can be a really lovely way of gently introducing these issues and starting these conversations with our kids in what feels like a very natural, unforced way, and loads of different ideas for the kids to things that they can do themselves. Now, we've got loads of questions, which I can see, but also I would really, really encourage you guys to think about something that you can now take away and do differently moving forwards. I don't care how small it is, but one small change that you can make, because we've had a lovely, we will have had a lovely hour together on a Saturday morning with the sun shining. But nothing changes if nothing changes. So if you do want to annoy Sarah and confuse the questions with any changes that you're going to make as well, whack them into the Q&A, because it makes me feel good that we've had some action taken at the end of a session. So if there's any changes that you're going to make, pop them into the chat. and we can head over to some questions. Massive apologies for running over, so it means we have slightly less time.
It's because there was so much to say. Thank you, Jen. That was absolutely wonderful. I just forgot that I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of the talk. So I'm Sarah West. I'm director of the Stockholm Environment Institute York office, which is at the University of York. And I also happen to be involved with York's Nappy Library and York's Sling Library. So this is an area that I feel very familiar with. So we've had some really great questions come in. I just wanted to start off by asking a question from Arthur, which is, are there any areas which you would recommend on if you're just starting out, so with being more eco-friendly? So he suggests, would fast fashion and food be two, or are there other changes that you think people should start with?
So and it's not particularly parenting related, but looking at your home energy supplier is, I think, hands down one of the biggest impact things we can do. So switching to a renewable tariff. So there's a great website called bigcleanswitch.org. You can grab a recent bill, go on there, whack in your details, and it will list all the renewable providers, and you literally pick a quote that you want. And that's a brilliant, because once it's done, walk away. Like, you could do it during Peppa Pig, like you can get it done. But yeah, I mean, the things that I think are good starting points are those visible, tangible things. So plastic is always a great in, and especially to talk with the kids about, because they really get it. Fast fashion, I think, is a really great conversation to have with your sort of older children as well. But fast fashion with kids becomes a little bit more difficult, because you can't. But you're definitely buying secondhand, looking for secondhand uniform. I didn't mention we have a secondhand uniform shop at our school, which is just phenomenal. So yeah, and food is a great one. Food is like 25%, I think, of our individual carbon footprint. So that's another great one to start on. But it doesn't have to be all about like the whole family must be vegan. Think about food waste. Think about reducing meat. Think about different choices you can make, rather than it being like this big thing. But start small, I would say. Start with the small things, start with the visible things, so you get some really nice quick wins that feel like you're nailing it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Some really nice ideas there. And we have a question from Jane about influencing. And she asks, do you think that that's where the biggest drive for change is in those individuals seeing you as an individual do something, rather than in celebrity influencers, for example?
I really, really want some. I don't know how it could happen, but can you imagine the difference it would make if celebrity influencers suddenly started having these conversations, suddenly started making different choices? I mean, that would be absolutely huge, I think. But like I said, I don't know how to make that happen. So the thing that I can do is be an influencer myself, and do that in a very gentle, non-judgmental, non-preachy way. But yeah, I think, this idea, imagine if 8 billion people, believed they could make a difference, and that is how this idea, I'm just a drop in the ocean. Yeah, but cheesy, but we make up the ocean. So yeah, I think, if there does feel like there's a groundswell coming or taking part. So yeah, we need to be part of that.
And I love that you said never underestimate the power of being seen to do good. Yeah. And I think that's really nice. And that idea that you can do that in your circle of friends, or on Facebook, or on other social media platforms, or in the playground, I just thought it was really nice. Yeah, thank you. So somebody asked a question about subscriptions for toys, which they think is a really nice idea that they've never thought about before. So do you think that subscription-based borrowing services will be a way forward for a lot of industries?
Yeah, there's in the book I was researching, there's toys, there's clothes we talked about. There's one for bikes called the bikeclub.co.uk. So you can, because obviously kids grow out of bikes. There was one for buggies, but it seems to have gone very quiet during the pandemic. So I don't know if that's still running or not. But yeah, I think especially with kids where they grow out of stuff so quickly, don't they? Or they get bored of stuff so quickly. So I think it's something that hopefully, and I think, the borrowing economy and the sharing economy generally is growing, but I think there's so much scope for it with kids stuff, definitely.
Yeah, and that leads us on really nicely to a question from Sophie, which is, do you have any suggestions for grown out of kids' clothing that aren't in decent condition? Yeah. So she says, like many of us, I guess, you give the good bits to friends or to charity, but what about the stained, torn, old bits? Do you have any ideas for that?
What is it with the marker pen on school uniform?
Why do they even have marker pens at school?
So, if you're really keen, you can cut stuff up to make cleaning rags and things like that. If you're, you can just put stuff in the textile recycling bank if your local recycling centre has one, or sometimes they'll be in supermarket car parks and stuff. One thing I did, and we're going to try and run a workshop at school this year, is all the old school uniform, you can cut it into strips and make a gorgeous rag wreath. So I did that when our head teacher left with old school uniform, because it's all the like checkered summer dresses and the jumpers and stuff. And that looks really nice. There might be some upcycling and things that you can do. But yeah, if all else fails, into the textile recycling bank.
Absolutely. That's a really good idea. I think the other thing I would say is that often people will take like job lots of them if they've got kids who are going to nursery,
yes,
and it doesn't matter.
Anyway.
I mean, they're going to get trashed anyway. So yes, that's
and
another
things like pants that you might not think you can give to the charity shop. Sometimes nurseries and reception classes will want them because children are having accidents and things like that. And sometimes this sounds awful, like you're fobbing off your worst stuff on people in need. But sometimes women's refuges and things can just need, clothes for when women and families have had to leave a house with nothing. So something that you might not put on your child, but can still be really functional.
Yeah, great, thank you. And Rob asks, one of the worst things they found is takeaways. Do you or anyone, maybe you could say in the Q&A session, does anyone know of any places that take back the plastic or foil containers, or will reuse the ones you already have?
Oh, I don't know of any. There are more and more places that are allowing you to take your own. Certainly they were pre-pandemic. I'm not sure about now. Obviously, the foil you can. We sort of have a stash that we then use for freezing portions of other things, like if I've made a lasagna or something like that. And they're actually really the foil tubs, because you can only recycle foil if it's a tennis ball size. So one tip I've seen is to just put all your bits of foil into one of those foil takeaway containers. When it's full, scrunch it into a ball, whack it in the recycling. So that can be helpful. The plastic containers are really helpful if the lids fit nicely for leftovers and lunches and things like that. So you might find if you've got a lot, you could list them on FreeCycle or Olio or something like that, and somebody might be more than happy to take them off your hands.
Thank you. And somebody said in the chat that they use their containers for toy storage, which is a brilliant idea, because all those little bits of Lego all over the place, or delivering baked goods to friends if we make too much.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I want to be your friend, Sophie. That's lovely. And somebody else asks, are all these resources listed in your book, Jen? And do you have any leaflets or lists on your website?
So all the resources are in the book. Yep. There are blog posts and bits and pieces on the website. There's a whole blog post on plastic-free party bags. There's one on like plastic-free fundraisers for PTAs and things like that. So there's loads of resources and podcasts and things like that to listen to on the website as well.
Fabulous, thank you. Well, the questions have slowed a little bit, so I think we'll probably finish up now. I just wanted to say a huge thank you, Jen, for a really, really fascinating talk. I think everybody's learned something here that they can take away with them. If you do want to say in the Q&A if there's something that you're pledging to do, then that would be amazing. Great. That would be really nice. So, thank you so much for coming along.
Can I just point out this genius tip from Nicola? We're all familiar with the Tupperware drawer of doom, aren't we? Top tip for takeaway boxes: use different coloured nail polish to match the boxes with the right size lids. I spend my life looking for lids in the Tupperware box. That's amazing. Thank you, Nicola.
Nicola,
or something, yeah.
I'm not sure if I have any nail polish.
No, I don't think I do, but
I'm going to go and find something to do that. That is absolutely brilliant idea. Thank you. And thank you all to all of those who've watched and taken part, because it's been really nice hearing all of your ideas and your suggestions. So thank you so much. So there are so many other things going on in the York Festival of Ideas. So don't forget to have a look at some of those things that's going on. If you'd like to buy a copy of Jen's book, which I strongly recommend, I've really enjoyed it, you can get them from the book selling partner, which is Fox Lane Books. And we really hope that you'll come to some more York Festival of Ideas things. So you can check out York Festival of Ideas, and also you can use the hashtag York Ideas if you are on social media. So thank you all so much.